We have. Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Andrew Duncan. Now we have some new chair's recommendations for this, and you're going to get a copy of them now. Something many of us have been talking about. Okay. Over to you, Sec. So I'll move those recommendations. Have I got a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Wood. Right.
So this report follows on from the directions that you gave officers in May last year, asking us to come back with a better connection between where we collect development contributions and where it's spent. And this report is recommending that you agree to increase the number of funding areas for park spending and stormwater to make that better connection between where the money is spent, collected locally and spent locally. We have to go and consult on these changes, and we'll go and carry that consultation out should you agree for us to proceed with this. So we're going to move from 22 to 36 funding areas for stormwater and from 4 to 26 for parks, and there'll be 22 local funding areas for parks. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councillors, we were quite deliberate in the recommendations that we talk about accommodate the needs of special housing areas, and we talk about areas because stormwater does not stop at the edge of a local board, and some parks are needed throughout the region. So rather than put the word local board in there, we're talking about local funding areas, which probably cover it. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, entirely supportive of going out for consultation. The question I'd ask is, why wouldn't we also deal with the amount of the contribution? And the background to that question is that we know that the amount that we're getting is woefully inadequate to provide the level of service in reserves that people have been used to in Auckland. And that has been exacerbated by the unitary plan, by special housing areas that have elevated the cost of purchase at effectively developed rates when we buy. So I would calculate that under the old scheme, where we might have had something of the order of $20,000 from a property, we're now getting approaching 5,800. So you know that's a huge drop if you apply it to a greenfield area alone. So why wouldn't we also address the quantum?
So the figures we have in here would come into effect from the 1st of July. They're based on the budgets and the expenditure decisions that the council has made in terms of investment in parks. We could only change those if you decided to make a greater investment in parks. Development contributions can only, and including the style in which they were done in the past as a percentage of land value, can only be collected based on what the council decides to spend. So if you're wishing to do that, you would have to make a decision to increase your investment in parks, and that can be considered in your budget debates. We would then follow through and implement that through the development contributions policy.
Thank you. Councillor Holtz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to be really clear, what I see your amended recommendations are trying to do is to pick up that, let me ask, is what your recommendations are trying to do is to pick up a little bit more clearly the funding following growth.
Yep.
So in other words, SHAs and areas that have accepted intensification are going to be the areas where the money will be spent on parks and infrastructure. No growth, don't expect the spend. Okay?
Probably that's in a nutshell. Councillor Watson.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with the general direction of these recommendations, but I've got a couple of specific questions that I'd like answered. Why in the reserve acquisitions, for instance, why is there then a difference in the amount being collected between different areas, say like the Hibiscus Coast and North Shore, for instance? Nearly $2,000 difference.
Part of it's to reflect the fact that in some areas we've already collected some money, so it reflects as differences in future and historic spend. So in some places we will have collected money that we're going to spend subsequently. In other places we've spent money and we're collecting it now. It also reflects the fact that the provision of a particular service level of parks will cost a different amount of money in different parts of the region because of land prices and also the different needs to be met in terms of growth patterns. It's all based on the investment decisions that were made by the council in its long-term plan for parks, and then we divide that by the amount of growth we're expecting to get in the area to come up with the price.
So there's a balancing out, even though we're dealing with current and future. There's a balancing out of what's already been spent. Is that what I'm hearing? That's why there's a $2,000 short anomaly in some areas. Is that right?
Part of the reason, yes.
Okay. Another question I'd just like clarification on, please, is one that I brought up before in respect of the existing urban areas. The phrase that's used here in point 17 is, there is more focus on developing existing parks to support higher usage rates. I was under the impression that that will largely be the sole focus as opposed to more. I remember back to a workshop where the statement was made that in existing urban areas there wasn't going to be reserve acquisition, they were going to invest money into existing facilities. Is that right?
That'll be pretty close to right.
Okay, so that's an important point certainly to note. Final question just goes to stormwater on page 169, I think it is. The percentage of the proportion of capital expenditure for growth that will be funded by development contributions is 96%. That's, I think, the figure that's mentioned there. I'm just trying to reconcile that with a meeting the other day where the ratepayer developer contribution was a lot more indeterminate than that. In fact, we were told at one point that that the ratepayers would be making a significant contribution to a very large sum of money. So is this 96% in all instances, or is there a degree of give and take on this?
This is 96% of the growth capital expenditure. So whilst ratepayers will be paying towards stormwater infrastructure that's required, the stormwater infrastructure program that is in the development contribution policy will be funded 4% from rates.
So stormwater may have other investment projects that are service level related.
Okay, so it's wrong to assume that the 96% is the all-up cost that there could be significant ratepayer contributions in certain areas.
Yes.
For non-growth related projects.
Okay, but if it's growth related, it should be 96%.
Yeah, at the moment, this is the cap that we've been allowed, so we have to keep the development contribution price at a certain level, and that equates to 96% funding through the project.
Sorry, just one final question, Madam Chair, and again it goes to this notion of comparability that Councillor Walker was referring to. In the past, and I'd just like to see if this information is right, it's been quoted in North Shore, for instance, that the reserve contribution was roughly 7% of the DC. By my calculation now, if say on an average property of say $500,000, we're way below that. It's more approaching 1.9%, 2%. Is that the degree of shift in the relativity?
So there's a couple of things there. First of all, that 7% may well have been of a much lower land value figure. Secondly, whether we're collecting it as a percentage of land value or as a fixed sum, as is written here, we can only collect the amount required to purchase the land that we've said we're going to purchase in our long-term plan. So the decision-making on what we collect is really driven by the planning decisions and the budget decisions on what we're going to spend. We can then go and collect from that, whether it be by a percentage or otherwise. So we don't increase the amount we collect by going for a percentage of 500,000. We increase the amount we collect by deciding on how much purchasing we're going to do. So it comes back to that point. What's the service level you want for parks across the region? What will it cost to do that? And then work through the process from there.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question that I want to put, I don't want to be seen in the context of the tensions that may have existed in the past between where you've got existing communities and greenfield growth. I want it to be posed in the context of the sports network program that Paul Marriott Lloyd and others are overseeing for council. I'm troubled by these recommendations because I think we've got the cart before the horse here. We know that the future of sports and parks are going to be probably around larger multi-purpose facilities, and we've commissioned a really important piece of work to understand what type of facilities they might be. We're yet to understand the distances that are going to be fair, that people can travel to participate in major parks facilities, whether it's hockey or tennis or quite what it might be in terms of codes. And this is, as I read it, beginning to lock in or create expectations in local board areas that it's going to be something different than I anticipated from officers, the kind of overview that we were going to try and take. So Sue, I wonder whether you can help me or Andrew understand how this will be interpreted by officers, because at the moment I don't feel inclined to support it, because I don't feel that the integrity of the work that will be required, and developers will have a legitimate expectation that if those contributions are being made, that they are for specific matters. And I don't believe that we've undertaken the policy sufficiently to be able to do that yet. So Andrew, can you enlighten me?
Yeah, so certainly the development of sports fields for the region is very important, and definitely we've sought to reflect that in here. So we separate out the local from the regional.
Yep.
The sports fields developments are captured in at the regional level, and what the policy is saying here is there'll be one regional level for parks. There's a few, 2 or 3 sub-regional levels, but the sports fields and those developments that you're talking about are at the regional level. Developers, when they get their contributions, can see that it's made up into a local, sub-regional and regional part for parks. Once the council's determined its broader regional investment in sports fields through the process that Councillor Fletcher refers to, we will put that into that Tier 1 parks thing in the development contributions policy. And definitely we already have money in Tier 1 for regional. As that changes through that policy development, it'll be reflected in here for exactly the reasons that Councillor Fletcher said, and the policy is designed to accommodate those concerns to deliver that end.
With that context, I'm happy to support them, because I think it is about the prioritisation in a sensible way, but I just wanted belts and braces on that point. Thank you.
It's reflected. Thank you. Councillor Cashmore.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So Andrew, I'm supporting this. I think it's critical. So it's driven by planning. One of the issues we have is there are aspirations in some of the developments, especially in greenfields developments, for a higher level of amenity, and they are wanting to attain that by a specific development type agreement between the landowners and council. Does this still enable that to happen?
Yeah, certainly this will allow that to happen. They might have to pay a bit more to get there, which will help them sell the houses better, but we would work, our planners and Parks Department will work with that. If they want a bit more and they're prepared to put a bit more in, then that's fine.
I'm dealing with several instances, several quite large developments where there's been community organisations and existing community doing work with the developers to deliver something a little bit different from the norm. And there's sort of agreement around their table to achieve that, as long as we can sort of find a way to make that happen around our table as well. And you've said yes to that, so that's cool.
Obviously, bearing in mind that it doesn't flow over into extra costs for the ratepayers subsequently, so that's part of a negotiation that our Parks Department would have with the developer.
But there is some flexibility, and that's
Yes,
that's
yeah,
critical.
definitely.
Thank you. Councillor Darby.